most flamboyant and successful fashion designers gunned down this morning in front of his Miami Beach home.
Cunanan is a 27-year-old white male.
The murderer may have been a serial killer, one of the FBI's most wanted.
Cunanan that summer was America's terrorist.
Cunanan. Andrew Cunanan.
He had people in a panic.
The serial killer is still out on the loose. I mean, that scares me still.
Eyewitnesses say the killer walked up, shot Versace twice in the back of the head, and ran.
Oh my God, there's blood everywhere. Please. A fashion icon gunned down outside his house, execution style in broad daylight. It is so brazen.
The FBI says Cunanan is on a killing spree that has involved 5 victims in 4 states.
Nobody knew where he was going to strike next. Nobody knew what was motivating him.
27-year-old Andrew Philip Cunanan, now the Bureau's prime suspect. Question now, what's driving Cunanan?
Johnny discovered South Beach by accident. He and Antonio, his partner, were on their way to Cuba. The flight was delayed.
He had his cab driver take him for a drive around South Beach.
He fell madly in love with the town. It was everything. If you were young and you were pretty and you owned a pair of roller skates or a bicycle, you were on Ocean Drive showing it off.
I used to tell him, you've got to go to South Beach. The gays are fabulous. People have a different attitude. We wear G-strings. We go topless. I mean, it was fantastic. So what did he do? He goes and buys himself a waterfront piece of property called Casa Casarina.
The house was pure indulgence. It's one thing to be indulgent and to be ostentatious, but to be indulgent and ostentatious with taste and money, it was this kind of interior architectural wonderland. Every room was kind of drop-jawed.
The Casa Casarina was magic. It had, like, you know, stars and moons and gold. He had every bit of the flooring was polished to perfection. The swimming pool, the tiles in the pool.
He wanted his eyes to be almost overdosed on amazing things. It was like creating your own Times Square without the neon.
I have a beautiful house, I have a beautiful life, but that is the media. What I desire is more.
What are you expecting to see from Versace? Power. The power woman.
Gianni Versace was at the pinnacle of his career in 1997. He made women look like women. He loved women.
Versace's clothes were the beginning of sex on the red carpet.
He loved the shape of a woman's foot. He loved the shape of a woman's leg. I put on a dress and I said, oh man, I can go get laid in this outfit.
Versace basically created some of the greatest dresses that anyone ever saw on a red carpet. He wanted you to be unforgettable. And that's why he made the clothes the way he did.
My mother was a fashion maker, and it's like oxygen for me, fashion. I love doing fashion.
He created the illusion of being a kind of god in that world, and he paid the price for that illusion.
Versace was in love with life, and he wanted to make the world more beautiful. Andrew Cunanan was just the opposite. Versace had everything that Cunanan wanted. Power, fabulous wealth, and admiration. The world owed him.
The world would know two things after the murder of Gianni Versace. They would know who Versace was, and two, they would know his killer was Andrew Cunanan. That's what Andrew wanted. Look at me. I can get to anyone. Andrew was the fourth of 4 children, but he was the chosen one. He was the prince.
His parents did everything for him, more than the other kids, because he was the youngest.
We learned that he had an IQ of 147. He was the kid that was going to succeed out of all their children.
He was my father's pride and joy. He really was.
What kind of little boy was he?
When he was about 10 years old, he had read the whole set of encyclopedias.
At 10?
At 10, and memorized it. And you could ask him any question, pick up any edition, ask him any question, and he would tell you.
I think they had a fairly comfortable home life, while his dad, Modesto, who was a longtime Navy veteran, became a stockbroker.
He got everything that he needed. My dad gave him a sports car, and actually he had the master bedroom. He had his own bath and everything.
He went to a boarding school, the Bishop School. That school was status. That school had the children of diplomats, had the children of the rich and powerful. The relationships that he began at the Bishop School, again, kind of set the table for him. And not only for the tastes and appetites that he had, but the circles he was used to moving in.
Andrew's self-worth was tied to the finer things in life, what they could do for him. Being accepted in high society and by wealthy people was what he expected. If he didn't get them, he was lost.
He was the talented Mr. Ripley.
Marge, you like everybody.
Don't like you.
Marge, you like everybody.
He told people he was from Philippine royalty. It appeared to everybody that he might have come from privilege. And he played that card big time.
He was living an extremely elaborate lie. And I think even he believed it at times.
In high school, he's voted the most likely to be remembered.
His life as a gay man, I think, began when he was at the Bishop School. It set him apart from other kids at the Bishop School. He wrote in his yearbook, in his high school yearbook, "Après moi, le déluge." After me, the flood. It certainly seemed obvious what the flood was. After a nationwide killing spree,
he did what he needed to do for himself. Narcissistic, obsessed sociopath.
Next, so how did the flood lead to 5 victims and a nationwide killing spree?
Was he born a serial killer? Did somebody make him a serial killer?
2020 continues with Dying to be Famous, the Versace murders.
Versace turned South Beach into an international glamour zone.
Everybody in South Beach loved Versace. He was generous. He was a member of the community.
He was the unofficial mayor of South Beach. He loved the attention. He loved being part of this.
He often talked about how America was so much safer than Italy. He was from Calabria, which was a home of some of the mafia. If you talk about fate, you had a man on the East Coast in Miami Beach who loved America because he thought it was safe. On the West Coast, you've got a bag street hustler who's making his way across the country. Andrew Cunanan always felt that he was an outsider. His father abandoned the family when he was 19 and just left the mother and Cunanan and his siblings destitute.
he went to live in the Philippines with his dad for about a month and came back to the United States complaining about the squalor that his father was living in. I think he decides at that point, on his return from the United States, it's sort of like, you know, Scarlett O'Hara saying in Gone with the Wind, right? I'll never be hungry again.
He wanted to be wealthy, he wanted to be powerful, he wanted to be admired.
And he started living by having very wealthy, elderly men support him.
Andrew's father taught him, wealthy people can give you things. Learn all about them.
And he became a pro at it.
He was very good looking. His father was Filipino, his mom was Italian. He kept in shape.
Near genius IQ, so he could talk art, music, politics.
He wanted to be secure, financially secure. He wanted to be able to take time off and just go sailing for a month or two, not have to worry about anything.
He was flown to Paris for dinner and Aspen for skiing. $800 an ounce caviar, cases of champagne. And he would send postcards to all his friends, and it was just over-the-top living.
St. John Contferrat is very cute. Lots of big white villas, pretty beaches, yachts, lavish parties, prosciutto and melon for breakfast overlooking the Grand Canal. I wander through a maze of streets and bridges to Florian's, sometimes bouncing over the lagoon on a stream of sunlit foam.
Andrew thought he was using his victims, and to a degree he was, but they were using him too.
Norman Blatchford was a sugar daddy to Cunanan. He was a semi-retired businessman in his 60s.
Norman Blatchford was a very wealthy man, a patron of the arts.
And he lived in a super fabulous home overlooking the Pacific Ocean.
Cunanan moves in with Blatchford and becomes like his regular right-hand man.
Andrew got $2,500 a month from him. He bought him a car. He gave him access to his credit cards.
He's traveling to Europe, France, to Italy, to Spain. When the relationship with Blatchford ended, suddenly Andrew Cunanan's lifestyle starts to shrink.
He could not stand rejection.
He was using drugs. He had gotten sloppy and lost his looks.
Right around his mid to late 20s, all this lavishness starts to go away.
And the star was fading.
Andrew was pathologically obsessed with financial and social status, but he didn't want to earn it. He wanted to take it.
He was like a predator. He just made up whatever he thought that Mark wanted to think he was.
The two people who knew him best were Jeffrey Trail and David Madsen. Jeffrey Trail was a graduate of the Naval Academy. He never had a romantic relationship with Jeffrey Trail, but they had become friends when Trail was part of the Navy stationed in San Diego. I think Jeffrey Trail was sort of a touchstone. I mean, he was sort of something to say, he was normalcy in Andrew Cunanan's life.
David Madsen was supposedly the love of his life. Good guy, good person, up-and-coming architect in the area.
Madsen and Cunanan were like complete opposites. He had a career path, and I think Cunanan was kind of his walk on the wild side.
David was Andrew's life. He said many, many times that he would give up everything to move out to Minneapolis for David.
Did Madsen leave him?
Madsen left him. He was devastated by it. And when Madsen broke up with him, it was just, he was depressed.
Jeffrey Trail and David Madsen were men of substance. And so I think Cunanan was kind of fun, but over time, his lack of any kind of depth or any kind of seriousness wore pretty thin on them. And so part of the motivation for coming back to Minneapolis on that last weekend of April was an attempt to sort of reconnect with two of these very good, very close, very important people in his life who had pulled away from him.
He bought a one-way ticket. He told friends, I have business in Minneapolis. Yeah, he did. And murder was on his mind.
I think this killing spree really, strange as it sounds, started as a love story. There was speculation that maybe Madsen and Trail had had a romantic relationship. I think David Madsen came to symbolize all the rejection that Cunanan had had those last few years.
People that have this level of narcissism also have acutely low self-esteem. And so as a result, people feel like you've pulled away from me and you feel wronged, you feel shamed, and their only natural reaction is revenge. Cunanan was going on this one-way trip to kill off his past, basically.
Jeffrey Trail owned a .40 caliber Taurus semi-automatic handgun that had a case of hollow point bullets along with it. At some point, Andrew Cunanan got that gun.
If Jeff Trail would have reported the gun stolen, all this never would have happened. A lot of ifs, a lot of ifs. Cunanan was the luckiest criminal I ever chased.
Cunanan phones Trail, leaves a message on his answering machine and says, come over to Dave's apartment.
He buzzed into the apartment at 9:45-ish, went upstairs. Witnesses hear some scuffling outside and somebody saying, get the bleep out.
He beat Jeff Trail to death with a claw hammer, which is a very, very physical and personal type of homicide.
Jeffrey Trail was bashed over the head about 27 times.
There was blood spatters on the wall, on the floor. Jeff Trail's body was rolled up in a carpet, blood all over the place.
These murders were highly personal. And it's off the charts rage.
It has a very sadistic edge to it.
I think he wanted to punish Jeff.
What would have prompted this first killing in that apartment? It's up for conjecture. One of the things that we found in that apartment was that bag with the vials of steroids. Had Andrew Cunanan possibly been using steroids? Could this be explained as a roid rage kind of thing?
We had lots of rumors on Cunanan that he was out to get people that gave him the HIV virus. He did not have the virus. So you hear all this stuff, weird reports that he was into some S&M sex. I basically decided he had an alter ego, and when he killed Jeff Trail, he flipped to that. It wasn't him anymore, and that's when his path became clear to him.
David Madsen comes back to his apartment with his dog, and there's a body rolled up in the rug.
Police believe that after the homicide of Jeffrey Trail, that Cunanan held David Madsen hostage for 2 days in the apartment with the dead body.
David Madsen, I think, becomes a captive of Andrew Cunanan's at that point.
And the two get in the car and they drive out to an isolated area outside Minneapolis.
David Madsen was marched out on the banks of that lake and shot 3 times, once in the back, twice in the head with Jeffrey Trail's .40 caliber gun. We thought, whoa, what is this? What's going on here? These 2 homicides are clearly linked, and now what?
When we return, with 2 bodies behind him, was he just fleeing? Or did he already have his next victim in mind?
He was no longer Andrew Cunanan the gigolo. He was Andrew Cunanan the spree killer.
Next on Dying to Be Famous.
Every time a serial killer gets away with murdering someone, they feel more and more invincible and godlike. I can kill anyone.
Was he born twisted? Was he made twisted?
Crimes of anger, crimes of jealousy, crimes by a sociopath.
Andrew Cunanan allegedly began a killing spree. He's eluded police every step of the way. The hope now is he'll slip up.
In America's Most Wanted, we're saying he's killed twice in a very short period of time, and usually serial killers will escalate. Once they've crossed that horrible no man's land and they start to go on the rampage, they escalate. It's almost like the bloodlust of a shark. Now he hits Chicago.
We're here in Chicago to take on a crime that shocked this city.
He was no longer Andrew Cunanan the gigolo. He was Andrew Cunanan the spree killer.
So who does he run into somewhere in Chicago? Is Lee Miglin. 72-year-old older man with a family, with children.
Police found the body of real estate developer Lee Miglin in the garage.
We are treating this case as a homicide, and the investigation is underway.
Initially, it was a murder story of someone notable in Chicago, but there had to be more to this story than a random street robbery. And as it turns out, we quickly realized that it was much more than that.
He'd been beaten and stabbed with several different weapons.
He had been stabbed multiple times in the chest, and all of his ribs were broken. His head was wrapped with masking tape repeatedly.
There was some message in this madness. It was either very personal or it was intended to say something to somebody. I am a force to be reckoned with.
Cunanan had talked about liking to wear a latex mask with only the nostrils open. It was a little interesting that Lee Miglin's body was found with his head wrapped in plastic and paper, with only 2 holes for the nostrils.
I think when Andrew killed Lee Miglin, he was acting out a sexual fantasy. He didn't have to do what he did, tie him up the way he did, render him helpless. When a sadist renders their victim helpless, it enhances the experience for them. It's arousing for them. Domination and control is what it's all about.
It indicated to them that it was unlikely that this was sort of a random act.
The FBI says Miglin and Cunanan, quote, may have met, unquote, but that there's no known connection.
I have no evidence, never found any evidence that he ever knew Lee Miglin, even though there were a lot of reports.
There's been some suggestion that this might have been a random crime. I'm going to take a leap here and say there was some sort of relationship. Could have been sexual, could have been something else. but there's something that's deep-seated in Andrew to go and kill Lee.
It's just on and on and on in terms of what he does to him. And that's not something that a stranger would do.
He ransacked the house, took Miglin's precious and prized coin collection, got in Miglin's car, and took off.
When he's on the run and making multiple phone calls from Lee Miglin's Lexus, the cops are beginning to track him because it's pinging off of cell towers.
They had triangulated the cell phone that was on the Miglin car he was driving.
They had tracked him as far as Philadelphia, and it got leaked to the press.
Looking for Andrew.
Chicago police determined that somebody, they presume Andrew Cunanan, has used the car phone in the Lexus twice in the past 24 hours in Philadelphia.
Unfortunately, he heard it on the news radio that we were tracking that cell phone.
Andrew Cunanan heard that radio transmission and ripped the phone out of the car. Then meant they lost their ability to track.
So he's got to the car. The car is the clue that ties him to Lee Miglin's murder.
Just before sundown, Cunanan apparently spotted the entrance to this remote federal cemetery and drove down a one-lane road where he encountered 45-year-old gravedigger William Reese.
Bill Reese was reading his Bible and listening to Christian music on the radio before Cunanan showed up.
Andrew Cunanan pulls into a very deserted historical cemetery. Because it's a historical cemetery, you don't see families in there putting flowers down for Grandpa.
Cunanan confronted Mr. Reese up here in the parking lot of the federal cemetery, then forced him down the stairs into the basement.
Finds the caretaker, brutally murders him, and takes his red truck.
Because the media wanted a scoop, they had an exclusive, it took another life. We had a killer who had killed 4 people in 12 days in 3 different states.
Now he's got a new vehicle, he's on his south. They'd have got Cunanan, Lee Miglin's, pulled him over those gold coin there.
It was a lost, missed opportunity to catch this spree killer. God knows what he was going to do next.
2020 continues with more of Dying to Be Famous.
The Federal Bureau of Investigation placed on a list.
And Cunanan makes the top 10 FBI list.
Cunanan is suspected in 4 murders
occurring in Minnesota, Illinois, and New Jersey.
You had people in all parts of the country wondering whether Andrew Cunanan was going to show up at their house.
Authorities admit that by now, Cunanan could be anywhere.
Has he stopped killing?
The serial killer is still out on the loose. I mean, that scares me still.
Is he going to kill again?
Yes, I am alarmed, and I'm very concerned.
Who is he going to kill next? Cunanan wanted to be notorious. He wanted the recognition he felt he deserved.
It was very chaotic.
You were flying right next to America's Most Wanted individual.
I don't know that I was.
Around the nation, the mere mention of Cunanan's name brings out the media in droves.
He could have been anywhere. He was anywhere and nowhere.
Looking for Andrew.
Cunanan was believed to have fled.
There have been hundreds of reported sightings of
There has
Cunanan
only
in
been
all 50
indirect evidence
states.
of the fugitive's presence.
I think the one state we didn't have a lead in was Montana.
Cunanan warnings are also posted tonight here on the East Coast.
Well, I believe Andrew Cunanan came to Miami because that was one of the areas so he was going to blend in pretty easily.
So I would caution all people to just be careful if they do spot him.
We believe that the vehicle may be occupied.
And you know what he was doing?
That occupant is deemed armed and dangerous.
He was hiding in plain sight.
911 gets a phone call. There was a sighting by a employee of Miami Subs that recognized him from America's Most Wanted.
Andrew Cunanan is 5'9", weighs 160 pounds, and has
we get a
dark
call
hair and brown eyes.
from a wonderful, conscientious viewer. He says, I believe the guy you're looking for is here buying a sandwich.
The police say, okay, stall.
The guy said maybe 10 minutes he had him there, and he walked out the door. Miami Beach police missed him by about 3 minutes.
You did not need Facebook to find Gianni Versace. South Beach was so small, 5 blocks.
He walked almost every single day down Ocean Drive to the News Cafe. The News Cafe had a wonderful selection of international papers, so he would get the newspapers from Italy.
He said, good morning. I said, good morning, and he went up towards his house.
We had plans to play tennis that morning. I didn't know that Johnny was out. I went into the dining room and I was picking at the fruit that he had there at the table.
As he's walking up the stairs, what we know now to be Andrew Cunanan comes up behind him and shoots him twice in the head at point-blank range.
When we heard bang, bang, I thought it was backfire from the lawnmower that was being worked on in the yard. But it wasn't.
One shot hits the left side of his face, the other shot hits the right side of his neck, and he goes down.
So I run out the door, and Johnny was laying there. I check his artery. Nothing. He was gone.
Oh my God, there's blood everywhere. Please help me, please. Tell me your location. In front of the Versace house, 1100 block Ocean Drive. Please, dear God.
I could remember Johnny just laying there. Yeah, I could see it. I could see the blood on the steps. Antonio came behind me. He's crying and yelling, "Who did this? Who did this?"
Supposedly a subject is running northbound 1300 Ocean Court with a gun.
I never saw his face. I don't want to look at his face. This is a man who killed my friend.
They're telling me this guy's about 5'8", pretty clean cut.
A white male wearing a white shirt and blue shorts.
And Antonio says, "Go get him, Lazaro. Go get him." And I did. I went after him. And I stopped because the person in the car yelled, "He's got a gun." And that's when Cunanan pointed the gun at me. And there were some gentlemen sitting here at the edge here, and they pointed to the garage. And that's when I told the officer, "He's in there. Go get him."
We realized we had a vehicle that was taken in a homicide that Andrew Cunanan committed up in New Jersey.
He was like living out of the truck because he had run out of money.
His car door was open, his identification was spilled on the ground.
There's clothes of Cunanan's, and he disappears. He's gone. He's underground. Now the FBI is hunting for him. Everybody's hunting for him.
Murder in Miami. He was one of the world's most influential fashion designers. Gianni Versace was murdered in broad daylight this morning.
It was a terrible day.
South Beach was the scene of a horrible crime.
Steps of his ornate mansion.
Mr. Versace was gunned down as he walked into his Miami Beach mansion.
It was all over the news, every channel.
Police say their main suspect is reputed serial killer Andrew Cunanan.
I couldn't believe it when I first heard of the accusations that was my brother.
This is not just a tragedy, but it is also a great loss to our community and, in fact, to the world.
Versace had only been back in Miami about 5 days, and based on the behavior at that murder scene, Andrew knew what those habits were. How fast does he walk, and who else is out there at the time?
What makes this murder completely different than the other ones is he does his homework. How am I going to get access to Versace?
Miami Beach investigators are currently interviewing witnesses and employees who work at the Versace residence in an attempt to learn a motive for this shooting.
There was a lot of speculation that there were Cunanan sightings near Versace's house, in Versace's house, at parties that Versace visited.
They had met in a bar, or that they had been introduced by somebody at some high society dinner.
Versace had done some costume work for the San Francisco Ballet, I think in early 90s. Was it possible that in his going around met Versace as part of that ballet? It was a possibility.
I can tell you that 3 witnesses put them together in California.
He supposedly met him at some sort of backstage or a private cocktail party. It was very, very brief, and you know, it's very possible that they did have some sort of intimate relationship.
Our best witness, I would say, was his partner. He said they never knew each other. But in my heart, I feel something must have happened at some point between the two.
The police say that a man simply came up behind him and shot him in the head. The murderer may have been a serial killer.
Cunanan killed Versace, the whole game changed.
Fashion great Gianni Versace, Andrew Cunanan. What was their relationship?
Well, now it was a sexy story. Now it was a salacious tabloid story.
Next, the final hours of Andrew Cunanan.
It was a scene out of Hollywood. Media's there, people are there, cops are there, it's chaos.
Next.
He came running, but he was already like dead.
This tall, lanky man shot this older man.
It was definitely looked like execution style. It was one bullet in the head.
Everybody in Miami is converging on South Beach.
When I arrived at the scene, it was like in full chaos. People crying, there was people throwing flowers on the sidewalk. It was media circus.
Gianni Versace. Hundreds and hundreds of journalists.
At the time, there was nothing bigger than the Andrew Cunanan Odyssey. It was the coup de grace for Cunanan. Nobody is going to be any bigger than Gianni Versace.
We saturated the city with police cars. Everybody was looking for Cunanan.
He was spotted everywhere. Leads went from the hundreds to the thousands. We couldn't keep up with it.
Miami Beach police received 100 calls just last night. If you spot him again, call me back.
The guy's smart. I'm telling you, you're dealing with a cunning guy who keeps moving. He knows how to stay ahead of everybody.
He walked around South Beach for a long time. Nobody recognized him.
Wondering if you have seen Mr. Cunanan in this area?
No, he has a familiar face, though. I knew he had to pop up. He had to get some money somehow.
After the Reese murder, Cunanan goes to a pawn shop to get money for a gold coin that he stole from Lee Miglin.
In Florida, you have to get your fingerprint taken when you pawn something, and you have to show valid ID.
And on the pawn receipt was Andrew Cunanan's name, his date of birth, a thumbprint, his signature.
He gives the Normandy Beach Hotel is where he's staying.
He used his real name, his passport. I went to the police department. The guy that reviews the pawn shop records was on vacation that week. So he lucked out again.
Employees of this Miami Beach hotel this afternoon tell ABC 7 News that Andrew Cunanan stayed here nearly every day from May 12th to July 14th, the day before the Gianni Versace murder.
Were you shocked to find out that this guy had been staying at your place for so long?
Shocked only to the extent that he was very quiet, very nice, peaceable person, and he was a model person. It was the kind of guest we'd like to have here.
It was one of those gobsmacked moments. It's like, oh my God, he's been living in this motel for 2 months.
We get a warrant for room 205, which was the room number that was listed on the pawn slip, but he ends up changing his room number like 3 different times.
Do me a favor, please don't go upstairs. You'll get your chance to go upstairs and see whatever you want as soon as we're done, okay?
That's when we had our first issue with the media.
We walk into the Normandy Beach Hotel, the desk clerk is there and opens the door and says, have at it.
This is the last room where hotel records reveal Cunanan stayed under an alias.
We see the camera panning, and it looks like stuff that Cunanan would have. So we're all like, what's going on?
In the bathroom, found what appeared to be beard trimmings.
If it's Cunanan's, it could provide authorities with DNA samples.
An empty box from hair dye or something like that.
And they were going through all kinds of evidence, all personal effects, obviously contaminating and tampering.
Well, that's their fault. They should have searched that room. They had control of the entire building for hours.
At this point, everybody in America knew who Andrew Cunanan was, and everybody knew what Andrew Cunanan looked like. And I think he could no longer hide in plain sight.
He was totally alone. He had no one to go to for help.
He's broke, he's desperate, and he knows the hounds are right behind him.
He had skipped out on his rent on the Normandy Hotel.
Just looked for a place to escape to, and it ended up to be the houseboat.
Shots fired inside the houseboat. Subject remains still inside.
So Cunanan, how ironic is this? He's hiding in the old houseboat across from the Fontainebleau.
The caretaker went to open the door, saw evidence of somebody sleeping in there, and heard a shot from within.
I had a pretty good feeling that this was a break that we needed.
The caretaker says, I can hear the TV going inside, and I can hear the news reports.
And the caretaker calls 911, and of course, the entire media descends on this houseboat.
Oh, my dad's heard gunshots. It's a boathouse.
What else did your father say to you?
He told me to call a cops fast.
It was a scene out of Hollywood. Media's there, people are there, cops are there, it's chaos.
Police have that entire block cordoned off. A SWAT team is in position.
There's helicopters all over the place. We couldn't hear ourselves talk. It was so loud.
Now every cop in the world is there. SWAT teams are come by little Zodiac boats into the river. They got snipers and everything.
Is it Andrew Cunanan? Could it be him, the man who has killed 5 people?
Hold up traffic, let no one go southbound on Collins Avenue. Reference SWAT team en route.
Kind of reminded me of the OJ, you know, the chase and all that. The world was witnessing this as it was happening.
This does not look like a situation that is going to be going away in the short time.
Does any unit have binoculars?
And the most difficult part was the 4 or 5 hour wait to finally get into that house.
I have a visual on the front door.
It seemed like it was going on for days, when it actually went on for about 4 or 5 hours.
You could see through the windows. They put in flash grenades, they put in tear gas.
When we first entered the home, we kind of had to back out because the gas was so strong. It seemed like he'd been there for several days.
He had no money. He knew he was going to be captured.
I went up the staircase, and that's where we found Andrew Cunanan lying on the bed in the bedroom. Next to in the bedstand, his signature glasses. The gun was consistent with someone that had shot themselves in the mouth.
When they found his body, they found newspapers with Versace killer on the headline. I mean, he had become notorious, and that's what he wanted.
So this is me coming out of the houseboat. My major approaches me right away. He wants to know, is it him? I let him know, yeah, it's him. And the nightmare ends.
Tonight, all across the nation, our citizens can stand down and breathe a sigh of relief. The reign of terror brought upon us by Andrew Cunanan is over.
It was street justice, and he administered it to himself. He got everything he deserved.
Next, a funeral with Elton John, Lady Diana. But was there a final hidden goodbye from Cunanan?
This is exactly the end that Cunanan wanted. Leave everything like a big puzzle. "2,000 people attended Versace's funeral, including Princess Diana and Elton John.
The service was in the Milan Cathedral. There was a casket, and in this silver box was the man I'd sat next to at dinner a week before. And why was he dead? You work very hard to become somebody, and then they kill you because you are somebody.
It was a shock event, because it happened so fast, because it was so sudden, because this was somebody on the pinnacle. But now what do we all do without him?
His killer was secreted off to San Diego by his family, afraid to alert anybody to where he was going to be buried for fear there would be vandalism of his grave. He wanted to be notorious, have recognition that he never had in life. He was going to be the guy, the least forgotten person.
Andrew Cunanan drove down here from California, murdering a total of 5 people, Versace being his final victim.
Andrew Cunanan was a con man, a hustler, smart, sociopath.
He was a liar all his life.
And a cipher.
I remember him as a little boy. My little brother.
I remember him young and innocent. I just, pray that in his last moments that, he looked up to God and asked for forgiveness. It's just unexplainable.
Even if he had lived, I'm pretty sure he would have lied about why he killed Gianni Versace.
This is exactly the end that Cunanan wanted. He wanted us all to keep wondering about him and thinking about him. He wasn't going to let police sit and question him. He was going to take his own life and just leave everything like a big puzzle. He was an enigma.
After me, the flood. The most likely to be remembered. Why did he kill Gianni Versace? My theory? He's the flood.